In August of 1944, just south of Caen in Normandy, Michael Wittmann gripped the cupola of his Tiger tank, number 007, his eyes sweeping across the landscape dotted with hedgerows. His commander's leather gloves creaked softly as he adjusted his binoculars, peering toward the horizon. His hands weren't trembling from fear. Something far more profound shook him from within, a growing realization that had been building since dawn broke that morning. They never stopped coming. Dear God, they just kept appearing. For the better part of 3 hours, his small company of 4 Tigers had been systematically destroying Sherman after Sherman. The fields around the Carfalaise Road now held 27 burning hulks, charred metal and twisted frames scattered across the landscape. Each of his Tigers had claimed at least 6 confirmed kills. By every conventional measure of tank combat that he'd learned during his training, they were winning decisively, almost overwhelmingly so. The exchange ratio was staggering, nearly 7-1 in their favor. But when Wittmann lowered his binoculars and counted again, his stomach tightened. 48 more Shermans were advancing toward him from 3 separate directions. Fresh units with untested crews and ammunition racks full to bursting. Behind them, the dust clouds rising on the horizon suggested dozens more approaching. His tanks had perhaps 12 rounds of armor-piercing ammunition remaining between all of them. There was no fuel for any significant maneuver, no reserves being sent to support them. The mathematics were becoming brutally clear. This wasn't about individual tank battles anymore, wasn't about one Tiger commander's tactical brilliance or the superior engineering of German armor. The real calculation was being written in factory production statistics, in numbers that rendered his skills and those of his men almost meaningless. It was an arithmetic of pure industrial might that would eventually crush everything beneath its sheer weight. Within the hour, Michael Wittmann would be dead. His legendary Tiger would be destroyed, either by a Sherman Firefly from the 1st Northamptonshire Yeomanry or by Canadian forces. Historians would argue for decades about which, but his final radio transmission, recorded at 12:47 hours, would capture the desperation of every German tank commander facing the American machine. Ammunition exhausted, enemy unlimited. The story of German tank dominance had begun years earlier, on May 26, 1941, at the Berghof, Hitler's mountain retreat high in the Bavarian Alps. Ferdinand Porsche and Henschel and Son had presented their competing prototypes for what would become the Tiger tank. Hitler, mesmerized by the massive 88mm gun and armor that no Allied tank could penetrate, immediately ordered production to begin. This machine, he declared to his assembled generals, would be worth an entire battalion of ordinary tanks. One Tiger would destroy a dozen enemy vehicles. The Führer's conviction spawned orders that set the tone for Germany's most fatal miscalculation. Quality would triumph over quantity, he insisted. Each Tiger would be a masterwork of German engineering, handcrafted by skilled workers, invincible on any battlefield. The Americans, Hitler assured his staff, could never match German engineering excellence. Their tanks were nothing but what propaganda minister Goebbels called them, Detroit tin cans on tracks. The first Tiger rolled off the production line at Henschel's Castle factory on August 4, 1942. It had consumed 300,000 man-hours of labor to build. The workers had carefully installed 26,000 individual parts. Master craftsmen had hand-fitted the transmission with meticulous precision. Skilled welders had spent days welding and shaping the armor plates. Even the interleaved wheel system, a marvel of engineering that distributed the tank's 57-ton weight across the ground, required assembly so precise that only experienced workers could accomplish it. Oberst Wolfgang Thomala, observing the first Tiger's trials at Kummersdorf, wrote in his official report that this machine represented the pinnacle of German engineering excellence, that no enemy could possibly stand against it. If Germany could produce 100 Tigers each month, he wrote, the war was won. Germany would never produce that many. The highest monthly production, achieved in April 1944 after 2 years of continuous optimization, was 104 tanks. By that same month, American factories were producing 2,000 Shermans every single month. American tank production had begun not with military planning, but with a simple telephone call. On May 28, 1940, William Knudsen, the former president of General Motors, received a call from President Roosevelt himself. The president was direct. "Bill, I want you in Washington. We need 50,000 planes and 50,000 tanks." Knudsen's response would define an entire philosophy of American production. "Mr. President, we can't build the best planes and tanks, but we can build the most planes and tanks, and we can build them so that any kid from Iowa can fix them with a wrench and a screwdriver." The Sherman tank emerged from this practical philosophy. At a design meeting at Aberdeen Proving Ground on August 31, 1940, Army Ordnance presented requirements that horrified traditional military engineers but delighted production experts in Detroit. The specifications called for simplicity above all else, components simple enough for inexperienced workers to build, parts that were interchangeable between all variants, engines that could run on multiple fuel types, armor plates that could be welded rather than precisely fitted together, a turret ring wide enough to accept future improvements. Major General Gladion Barnes, heading Army Ordnance, addressed the assembled contractors with blunt honesty. "I don't want a perfect tank. I want a good enough tank that we can build 1,000 of them for every 100 the Germans build. Make it reliable, make it fixable, and make it by the tens of thousands." The contrast between German and American production philosophy became starkly visible in the factories themselves. At Henschel's Castle plant, 9,000 skilled workers labored over Tiger production. The factory floor resembled a medieval guild workshop scaled up to industrial proportions. Master craftsmen supervised apprentices. Each tank was essentially hand-built from the ground up. Workers took such pride in their work that they signed their names on completed components. Unteroffizier Frank Leiphart, who worked at the Castle plant before being drafted into military service, later recalled those meticulous days. They spent 3 days just on the final drive assembly alone. Every gear was checked with micrometers. Every weld was inspected 3 separate times. They painted identification numbers by hand. It wasn't mass production, it was art. Meanwhile, at Chrysler's Detroit tank arsenal, which had opened on September 15, 1941, everything was radically different. The factory sprawled across 1.25 million square feet, larger than all German tank factories combined. Instead of master craftsmen, the workforce consisted of former automobile workers, housewives, teenagers, and anyone who could learn to operate a riveting gun or welding torch. Rose Will Monroe, who would later become known as Rosie the Riveter, worked on Sherman production at the arsenal. She described the experience later with amazement. "I'd never seen a tank before I started building them. They gave us 2 days of training, then put us on the line. Everything was broken down into simple steps. I'd weld one seam, the tank would move forward, someone else would weld the next. We'd finish a complete tank in 4 hours. The Detroit tank arsenal achieved something German engineers considered impossible: assembly line production of actual tanks. By adapting techniques from automobile manufacturing, Chrysler engineers broke the Sherman into modular components. Sub-assemblies were built on parallel lines, then brought together for final assembly. The entire process from raw steel to a completed battle-ready tank took just 48 hours. By December 1942, the production statistics were already telling a story that German commanders refused to believe. The Detroit tank arsenal alone was producing 896 Shermans monthly, more than double what most German intelligence reports suggested was even possible. Across America, 11 factories were building Shermans. The Detroit tank arsenal produced 896 monthly. Grand Blanc tank arsenal produced 385. The German Locomotive Works produced 165. Pressed Steel Car Company produced 320. Pacific Car and Foundry produced 280. Federal Machine and Welder produced 240. American Locomotive Company produced 210. Baldwin Locomotive Works produced 205. Pullman Standard Car Company produced 385. Strathroy Locomotive Works in Canada produced 180. Angus Shops in Canada produced 145. The total monthly production by December 1942 reached approximately 3,500 Sherman tanks. German monthly Tiger production during that same period was 34 tanks. The ratio was already 103 to 1. General Major Heinz Guderian, Inspector General of Panzer Troops, received these figures through intelligence channels in January 1943. His diary entry that day was succinct and devastating. If these numbers are even half true, we have already lost the war. The production disparity created cascading secondary effects that multiplied American advantages in ways German commanders barely comprehended. With thousands upon thousands of Shermans available, American tank crews trained on actual tanks rather than diagrams or wooden mock-ups. At Fort Knox, Kentucky, the Armored Force School had hundreds of Shermans dedicated solely to training purposes. Crews spent 12 weeks learning every aspect of their vehicle, firing thousands of rounds in gunnery practice, driving hundreds of miles, performing maintenance until they could replace any component blindfolded. First Class Clarence Smoyer, training at Fort Knox in 1943, later recalled those exhausting weeks. "We beat the hell out of those training tanks, drove them till they broke, fixed them, drove them again. By the time we shipped out, I knew that tank better than my family's farm tractor. Every sound it made, what it meant, every tool needed for every job." In Germany, Tiger tank training told an entirely different story. With total production barely exceeding 100 tanks per month at peak capacity, training vehicles were virtually non-existent. The Panzertruppenschule at Putlos had exactly 4 Tigers for training purposes. 4 tanks to train crews for every Tiger unit in the Wehrmacht. Gefreiter Kurt Klein, assigned to Schwerpanzerabteilung 503, described his abbreviated training. "We had 3 days in an actual Tiger. 3 days. We spent most of our training studying diagrams and sitting in wooden mock-ups. When we finally received our company Tigers in Russia, half the crew had never even started a Maybach engine. The complexity disparity compounded the problem exponentially. A Sherman tank had 15,000 parts and required 50 different tools for field maintenance. The Tiger had 26,000 parts and required 230 specialized tools. American crews could be trained to basic competence in 4 weeks. German Tiger crews needed 3 months just to reach minimal proficiency, time the Wehrmacht didn't have. D-Day on June 6, 1944, marked the beginning of the mathematical demonstration that would devastate German armored forces. The Allies landed with 4,000 tanks, mostly Shermans, with 8,000 more waiting in England for transport across the Channel. Against this overwhelming force, Germany had assembled its best effort. 1,347 Tigers produced in total since 1942, of which approximately 430 were operational on all fronts combined. In Normandy itself, the Germans could muster just 102 Tigers. Obersturmbannführer Ernst Bachmann of Schwere SS Panzerabteilung 101 witnessed the reality beginning on June 7th, near Caen. "We destroyed 8 Shermans in the morning engagement," he reported. "By afternoon, 16 more had taken their place. We destroyed 6 of those. By evening, fresh companies kept arriving. They came like ants. You could step on dozens, hundreds. Thousands more were behind them." The replacement rate told the real story of what Germany was facing. When America lost a Sherman, a new one arrived from England within 48 hours. The replacement system, organized by Colonel Joseph Gillam, maintained a reserve of 2,300 Shermans in British depots. Damaged tanks were either repaired within hours by mobile workshops or simply abandoned for fresh vehicles. When Germany lost a Tiger, replacement took weeks or months, if it came at all. Each Tiger required special railway cars for transport. The journey from Germany to Normandy took 5 days under optimal conditions. Allied air attacks often extended this to weeks or longer. Of 45 Tigers dispatched to Normandy in June 1944, only 17 arrived intact. June 13, 1944, provided a perfect microscope for examining this production war in miniature. Michael Wittmann's action at Villers-Bocage has been celebrated as the pinnacle of German tank warfare. In roughly 15 minutes, tanks under his command destroyed 14 tanks, 15 personnel carriers, and 2 anti-tank guns of the British 7th Armoured Division. Though historians debate whether all kills were Wittmann's personally or included his entire company's achievements, Nazi propaganda proclaimed it as proof of Aryan superiority and Tiger invincibility. What they didn't report was what happened afterward. Within 72 hours, the British 7th Armoured Division had received complete replacement of all lost vehicles from depots. Whitman's Tiger Company, which lost 3 Tigers in subsequent fighting, would not receive replacements for 6 weeks. Lieutenant Colonel John Cloudsley Thompson of the 7th Armoured later wrote with clarity, "Whitman was brilliant, no doubt. But brilliance is exhaustible. Industrial production is not. He could destroy our tanks faster than we could brew tea, but we could replace our tanks faster than he could reload." The production numbers only told part of the story. Each Sherman required a supply chain that delivered 150 gallons of fuel, replenished every 100 miles, 104 rounds of ammunition as a basic load, 30 gallons of oil and lubricants, spare track blocks and road wheels and filters, and food and supplies for 5 crew members. American logistics delivered this without fail, day after day. The Red Ball Express, operating from August to November 1944, employed 6,000 trucks, running continuously from the Normandy beaches to the front lines. In a single day, August 29, 1944, the Red Bull delivered 12,342 tons of supplies, 800,000 gallons of fuel, 3,000 tons of ammunition, enough supplies for 28 divisions across all fronts. Each Tiger required 650 gallons of fuel, replenished every 60 miles, 92 rounds of ammunition as a basic load, 100 gallons of oil and lubricants, specialized spare parts manufactured only in Germany, premium fuel that became increasingly scarce. German logistics crumbled under the weight of these demands. A Tiger battalion moving 100 miles required 40,000 gallons of fuel, more than most German depots contained. The specialized Maybach HL 230 P45 engine required high-octane fuel that Germany could barely produce anymore. By late 1944, Tiger units were often immobilized not by enemy action, but by empty fuel tanks. Gefreiter Wolfgang Schlich of Schwere Panzerabteilung 506 reported in August 1944 the nightmare situation. "We have 6 operational Tigers, but fuel for perhaps 30 kilometers. The Americans pass our hidden positions in endless columns. We dare not engage. We would destroy a dozen, 2 dozen, and then sit helpless as the 100 behind them crushed us." Sherman tanks were designed for maintenance by conscripts with basic training. The entire transmission could be replaced in 4 hours. Track replacement took 90 minutes. Engine swaps required 6 hours. Every part was accessible without removing other components. The sloped armor that critics claimed was inferior to the Tiger's thick vertical plates had a crucial advantage. Damaged plates could be cut off and welded on by any competent welder with basic equipment. Sergeant Robert Early, maintenance chief for the 3rd Armored Division, explained the philosophy. The Sherman was like a farm tractor with armor. Any kid who'd worked on his dad's John Deere could figure it out. We had replacement everything: engines, transmissions, turrets, tracks. Something broke, unbolt it, bolt on a new one. We'd have a knocked-out Sherman running again before the Germans finished diagnosing what was wrong with their Tiger. Tiger maintenance was a nightmare of endless complexity. The interleaved wheel system, brilliant for weight distribution, required removing up to 9 wheels just to replace one damaged wheel, a 12-hour job under ideal conditions. The transmission, a masterpiece of engineering with 8 forward gears, required specialized tools and trained mechanics for any serious repair work. The Maybach engine, powerful but temperamental, needed constant adjustment and attention. Feldwebel Hans Bauer, a Tiger mechanic with Schwere Panzerabteilung 502, described the reality of keeping these machines operational. "In Russia, we had a Tiger with transmission damage. The replacement transmission was in Germany. It took 3 weeks to arrive. Installing it required removing the turret. We needed a 15-ton crane. No crane was available. The Tiger sat useless for 2 months, while Shermans passed us every single day." By mid-1944, the mathematics of production had created a cascading crisis Germany couldn't solve. Each Tiger required a crew of 5 highly trained specialists. A commander required minimum 6-month training. A gunner required 4 months of specialized training. A loader required 2 months of training. A driver required 4 months of training on heavy tanks. A radio operator/hull gunner required 3 months of training. A complete Tiger crew with proper training required 19 man-months of instruction. Germany was losing Tiger crews faster than they could possibly be trained. When Tiger 007 was destroyed near Sintho on August 8, 1944, killing Michael Wittmann and his crew, Germany lost 60 man-months of irreplaceable training and years of accumulated combat experience. The Americans faced no such crisis. By 1944, Fort Knox was graduating 2,000 fully trained Sherman crews every single month. The standardization of the Sherman meant any crew could operate any tank without extensive retraining. Wounded crew members were replaced from a pool of 10,000 trained replacements waiting in England. Staff Sergeant Luffy, commanding a Sherman named In the Mood, described the American advantage. "We lost our loader at Sintho. Within 2 hours we had a replacement who trained on the exact same tank model at Knox. He knew every ammunition rack, every control. We didn't miss a beat." The German advantage in armor and firepower became irrelevant against an endless supply of trained men and replacement vehicles. While Normandy demonstrated the mathematical impossibility of German victory in the West, the Eastern Front revealed it as something approaching apocalypse. Operation Bagration, launched on June 22, 1944, deliberately on the third anniversary of Germany's invasion of the Soviet Union, saw the Soviets deploy 4,000 T-34 tanks against German Army Group Center's 495 tanks, including just 29 operational Tigers. But the Soviets had learned from American production methods. The T-34, crude compared to the Tiger, could be produced in 3,000 man-hours versus the Tiger's 300,000. Soviet factories were producing 2,000 T-34s monthly by mid-1944. When Germans destroyed 3 Soviet tanks, 5 replacements appeared. When they destroyed 5, 10 appeared. Hauptmann Ernst Lindemann of Schwere Panzerabteilung 505 recorded the mathematical horror. July 5th, we destroyed 16 T-34s near Minsk. July 6th, 22 more appeared. We destroyed 11. July 7th, 45 T-34s attacked. We destroyed 19 before running out of ammunition. July 8th brought a stark reckoning. 60 Soviet T-34s advanced against our lines. We could muster just 2 operational Tigers to meet them. Retreat became our only choice. The Soviets had learned well from American methods. They understood that quantity itself possesses a power all its own. Through Lend-Lease shipments alone, they received 402 Shermans, more tanks than Germany had produced Tigers throughout the entire war. It was the Italian campaign that gave German tankers their clearest window into American industrial capacity. The narrow, mountainous terrain forced tank engagements at close quarters where the Tiger's advantages nearly disappeared. But more troubling still was what German crews could witness firsthand: American replacement rates that seemed impossible. Oberleutnant Friedrich Bucher served with Schwer Panzerabteilung 508 and maintained meticulous records. On February 15th, he destroyed 4 Shermans near Route 6. By February 16th, 8 new Shermans occupied the identical positions. 3 days later, he destroyed 3 more, yet 12 Shermans attacked his unit on the 17th. By February 18th, the count had grown to 22. His Tiger company possessed 4 operational tanks, with barely 12 rounds per gun remaining. The weight of this mathematical reality crushed spirits far more than artillery ever could. Gefreiter Helmut Wagner penned a letter home that captured the desperation. "We are Sisyphus, pushing his boulder endlessly upward. Every Sherman we destroy emerges as 2 replacements. Every 2 becomes 4. We harvest tanks like a farmer cutting wheat, yet the field multiplies itself by nightfall." American tank recovery units magnified this horror. The 16th Armored Recovery Battalion accomplished what seemed miraculous to exhausted German crews. Captain Thomas Roberts explained their methods with matter-of-fact efficiency. "We'd snatch a burning Sherman from the morning's fighting, have it at the depot by noon, have mechanics working on it by mid-afternoon, and get it back into action the following morning. The Germans would count a kill, believing they'd eliminated a threat forever. Then 3 days later, that same tank would reappear on the battlefield." The statistics transcribed on factory reports across America became flesh and blood reality in Italian valleys. Workers at the Detroit tank arsenal knew precisely what their 12-hour shifts meant. Hunger banners hung above assembly lines declaring truths. Every tank we build is a life saved. Polish-born Mary Krivsky embodied that conviction. Her brother served with the 1st Armored Division in Italy, and she channeled every ounce of determination into her welding gun. That Sherman I'm building might be the one bringing my brother home. We worked 16-hour shifts during Sicily. She wasn't alone in this sentiment. Complaints barely registered. The production line never wavered. 3 shifts operated continuously, every single day of the year. By Christmas 1943, voluntary overtime reached 95%. Workers who called in sick received visits from fellow employees offering assistance. Absenteeism dropped below 2%. A stark contrast to German factories, where 15% absences had become routine by 1944's end. German industry faced entirely different obstacles. Constant Allied bombing campaigns disrupted everything. The Henschel factory absorbed 39 bombing raids between October 1943 and March 1945. Each attack halted Tiger production for days or sometimes weeks. Skilled workers disappeared into combat replacements. By late 1944, slave labor composed 40% of the workforce, yet brought sabotage and inefficiency rather than additional output. Friedrich Müller inspected German factories and filed a November 1944 report containing barely concealed despair. Castle factory manages 8 Tigers this month. 8. Americans produce this quantity in 4 hours. We employ enslaved workers who destroy more than they create. They employ free workers striving to build more. The arithmetic defeats us. We cannot win this mathematics. Then there was fuel, the element that exposed Germany's fundamental vulnerability. Shermans ran on regular gasoline, accepting octane ratings between 70 and 85. The radial aircraft engines that powered them proved remarkably forgiving, burning nearly anything flammable in emergencies. American oil supplies presented no constraints whatsoever. Texas alone produced 100 million barrels in 1944. Standard Oil refined 2 billion gallons monthly. Tigers demanded premium fuel, minimum 87 octane for the Maybach engines to function. Germany's synthetic fuel plants, struggling with coal liquefaction processes, produced fuel that damaged engines rather than powered them reliably. By late 1944, training fuel allocations disappeared entirely. New Tiger crews arrived at their units having never operated their tanks. The consumption differential bordered on grotesque. Tigers burned 2.75 gallons per mile on roads, 5.5 gallons cross-country. Shermans consumed 0.5 gallons on roads, 1.2 cross-country. Moving a Tiger company 100 miles demanded 15,000 gallons. The identical distance for a Sherman company required 3,000. Obersturmbannführer from Schwerer SS Panzer Company 900 described the impossible calculus in December. Our dense offensive begins December 16th. My Tigers carry fuel sufficient for perhaps 60 kilometers. Our objectives lie 200 kilometers distant. We are ordered to capture American fuel supplies. How does one reach American fuel without possessing fuel? This represents madness born of desperation. The Battle of the Bulge in December 1944 provided the mathematical proof of German defeat, written in blood and steel. Hitler assembled his final reserves, 450 tanks, including 69 precious King Tigers for Operation Autumn Mist. Arrayed against them, Americans deployed 8,000 tanks across Europe, with 6,000 additional vehicles in reserve or training within the United States. Initial German success seemed to vindicate quality over numbers. King Tigers of Schwerer SS Panzer Corps 501 destroyed Shermans at ranges exceeding 2,000 meters. Individual Tiger crews accumulated dozens of kills. German propaganda trumpeted these victories as evidence of Germanic engineering superiority. Mathematics reasserted itself within days. As Jochen Peiper's Kampfgruppe ran dry near Ligneville, American replacement tanks already rolled forward from Antwerp depots. Shermans destroyed on December 17th arrived as replacements by the 19th. Those lost on December 18th were replaced by December 20th. General George Patton's Third Army pivoted north with 350 Shermans on December 22nd, and despite losing 88 tanks to German gunfire, possessed 400 operational vehicles within 48 hours. Replacements had exceeded losses. Meanwhile, Piper abandoned all his Tigers, destroying them to prevent capture. Fuel starvation had rendered them useless. March 6, 1945, near Cologne Cathedral, cameras captured what would become the most filmed tank duel of the war. Yet 500 meters distant lay a scene those cameras missed entirely. 11 knocked-out Shermans ringed the cathedral square, destroyed by a solitary Panther over 2 days. Within 24 hours, 15 new Shermans occupied those same positions. The Panther, damaged and depleted of ammunition, was abandoned by its crew. This vignette repeated itself across the continent. Tactical German victory, strategic American victory through overwhelming numbers, an equation that favored the side manufacturing thousands of replacements. Feldwebel Gustav Schreiber served as a Panther gunner and survived to reflect upon this reality. Our company destroyed 258 enemy tanks, mostly Shermans, a magnificent achievement. Yet they replaced those 258 tanks in perhaps a week. We lost 12 Panthers and received 2 replacements across 6 months. Every tactical victory brought strategic defeat closer. The human accounting mattered equally. America trained 250,000 tank crewmen during the war. Germany trained perhaps 40,000 for Tigers and Panthers combined. When America lost a crew, 5 trained replacements waited in depots. When Germany lost a Tiger crew, irreplaceable expertise vanished. Sergeant Joe Sanders of the 2nd Armored Division understood this advantage acutely. We knew we had 50 more Shermans behind us. Take fire, bail out, walk back, climb into another tank, return to fight. Germans couldn't do that. They knew every Tiger represented irreplaceable expertise. Understanding we could absorb losses while they couldn't. That knowledge won the psychological war. The crew quality differential widened relentlessly. By March 1945, American tank crews averaged 6 months of training before entering combat. German Tiger crews, when they received Tigers at all, averaged 2 weeks of instruction. 16-year-old boys found themselves commanding 68-ton King Tigers they'd first encountered days prior. Wilhelm Hoffmann drove a Schwerer Panzer in Abteilung 512. His training exemplified the desperate situation. I'd driven a Hitler Youth truck. They gave me 4 days in a Panzer I-4, then assigned me to a King Tiger. The commander had been a store clerk 2 months earlier. The gunner had fired 5 practice rounds. We faced Americans trained for a year. The fundamental difference stemmed not from capability, but philosophy. Germany pursued engineering perfection. The Tiger represented masterpiece engineering. Its 88mm gun destroyed any Allied tank at 2,000 meters. Its armor deflected most Allied shells. Its sophisticated transmission delivered smooth power. Its interleaved wheels distributed weight ideally. America pursued production efficiency. The Sherman sufficed. Its 75mm gun struggled against Tiger armor. Its armor proved vulnerable to German weapons. Its transmission was simple. Its suspension was basic. But it was adequate. America built 36 Shermans for the cost of a single Tiger. William Knudsen, observing Sherman production in 1943, articulated American philosophy. The best tank isn't technically superior, it's the one present when needed. A Sherman in France beats 10 perfect tanks remaining on drawing boards. Albert Speer, Germany's armaments minister, reached similar conclusions far too late. His 1969 memoirs contained bitter reflection. We sought perfection and achieved paralysis. Every improvement delayed production. Every modification required retooling. Meanwhile, Americans built the same basic tank in overwhelming quantities. They won through arithmetic, not engineering. Shermans achieved 90% operational readiness. From 100 Shermans in a unit, approximately 90 would run on any given day. Mechanical failures remained uncommon and repairs quick. Simple systems rarely broke. When they did, replacement parts and mechanics were abundant. Tigers achieved 35% operational readiness by late 1944. Perhaps 35 from 100 would function. Complex systems failed constantly. The sophisticated transmission required major maintenance after 500 miles. Interleaved wheels collected mud that froze in Russian winters, immobilizing tanks until chipped free. Major Hans Kruger, maintenance officer for Schwere Panzerabteilung 503, documented January 1945. Of 45 Tigers on strength, 11 were operational, 8 awaited transmissions, 6 required engines, 12 needed track repairs, 8 possessed multiple failures. We cannibalized 3 Tigers to maintain single operational vehicle. Americans discarded damaged Shermans and received new ones. By early 1945, American production transcended mere numbers. It created strategic freedom. Commanders could plan operations, knowing losses faced immediate replacement. They could trade tanks for objectives. They could employ Shermans as expendable assets. General Omar Bradley expressed this calculus bluntly. We knew we'd lose 4 Shermans for every Tiger destroyed. We also knew we had 10 Shermans for every Tiger. The mathematics were straightforward. We could afford that exchange. They couldn't. German commanders faced strategic paralysis instead. Every Tiger lost diminished future capabilities. Operations required calculating whether objectives justified irreplaceable losses. By March 1945, standing orders prohibited Tiger units from engaging, except when absolutely necessary. General Major Wolfgang Lange commanded Panzer Lehr Division remnants and expressed German paralysis. I possessed 8 Tigers and faced 900 Shermans in my sector. Revealing Tiger positions invited artillery and air destruction. Refusing engagement meant Sherman overruns. We were reduced to watching our destruction through periscopes. Germany surrendered on May 8, 1945. The production tallies revealed the complete story. Tigers, 1,347, produced from August 1942 to August 1944. King Tigers, 489 to 492, produced from January 1944 to March 1945. Total Tiger production, approximately 1,139 vehicles. American M4 Sherman production across all variants, 49,234, produced from February 1942 to July 1945. British and Canadian factories added 2,000 more. Total Allied Shermans, 51,000 plus. The ratio, 27.7 Shermans for every Tiger. Yet production statistics omitted operational reality. May 1945 found fewer than 20 Tigers operational worldwide. Approximately 35,000 Shermans remained combat-capable. German Tiger crews available, fewer than 200. American Sherman crews available, 40,000 plus. A 1975 reunion at Fort Knox brought together American and German tank veterans. Their conversations revealed how profoundly production mathematics had shaped both sides. Otto Carius, Germany's second highest scoring tank ace with 150-plus kills, spoke with candor. We fought mathematics, not Americans. I destroyed 10 Shermans and 20 appeared. Combat became arithmetic. We attempted defeating an avalanche through individual excellence. Staff Sergeant Clyde Branson had commanded Shermans across 3 armored divisions after losing 2 tanks beneath him. He responded thoughtfully, "Otto's absolutely right. Most of us weren't tank aces. We didn't require excellence. Adequacy and overwhelming numbers sufficed. Wars aren't won by heroes, they're won by production lines." The most poignant exchange occurred when former Oberleutnant Hans von Lack posed a question. "Did you understand? Did you know your numbers would destroy us regardless of skill?" Sergeant Ray Hopkins answered simply, "We knew. Every replacement depot we passed held hundreds of new Shermans. Every letter from home mentioned factories running 3 shifts. We understood you were fighting America's entire industrial machine. We almost pitied you." American mass production generated ripple effects beyond raw numbers. With thousands of surplus Shermans, America experimented constantly. Specialized variants emerged monthly. The Sherman Firefly carried a British 17-pounder gun. The Sherman Jumbo featured extra armor. The Calliope variant mounted rocket launchers. The Crab variants operated mine flails. Amphibious DDs, dozer blades, flamethrowers, endless variations. Germany could scarcely maintain standard Tiger production, let alone develop variants. Each experimental modification diverted irreplaceable resources. The Sturm Tiger, converting Tigers to assault guns, consumed resources to produce merely 18 vehicles, a catastrophic diversion of precious capability. American supply depots stocked 50,000 different Sherman parts, each readily available. This abundance enabled rapid repairs and endless experimentation. The machinery of war ultimately hinged on something far more fundamental than engineering brilliance. Any spare part a unit needed could arrive within 3 days. German Tiger divisions, by contrast, spent months waiting for critical components, often stripping operational tanks just to keep a handful running. Technical Sergeant Mike Kozlowski, stationed at a forward supply depot in Belgium, captured the stark reality of American logistical superiority in his own words. "We had warehouses absolutely packed with everything you could imagine. Engines, transmissions, gun systems, track assemblies. A unit radioed in requesting parts, and we'd have a truck loaded and rolling within hours." Kozlowski paused, reflecting on the sheer waste that seemed incomprehensible to any German officer who might have witnessed it. "I discarded more spare parts just because we lacked storage space than German tank units ever actually received in an entire year." American tankers inhabited an entirely different world than their German opponents. They understood, with absolute certainty, that if their tank was destroyed, another would arrive to replace it. They grasped something Germans never could afford to believe. Staying alive mattered more than becoming famous. They understood they could afford caution. First-class Clarence Smoyer, a Sherman gunner, described the mentality that flowed down from commanders to every crew member. "Our lieutenant was crystal clear about our mission. Your job isn't to become a hero. Your job is to survive, keep moving forward, and stay alert. When you spot a Tiger, you call in artillery or air support. You don't try anything foolish. Heroes end up in body bags. We've got more tanks sitting in depots than we have trained crews to crew them. Keep yourselves breathing, and we'll keep you in tanks for the rest of this war." German Tiger crews faced an entirely inverted reality. Every Tiger represented irreplaceable machinery. Every experienced crew constituted invaluable human capital. Yet they were ordered into combat situations where the mathematics itself seemed cruel and nonsensical. Feldwebel Karl Broman, serving as gunner in a Schwerpanzer of Heavy Tank Battalion 502, articulated the psychological torture of their position. "We understood we needed to destroy 10, maybe 20, perhaps 30 enemy tanks just to justify why our single Tiger had to exist. The weight of that arithmetic crushed us daily. We weren't soldiers in any traditional sense. We were accountants, constantly tallying whether we'd killed sufficient numbers to validate the resources our machine consumed. Behind those horrifying production numbers stood industrial infrastructure that determined which side would ultimately prevail. American manufacturing plants sat safely inland, completely immune to enemy bombing raids. Detroit hummed with activity. Chicago's foundries roared constantly. Pittsburgh's mills operated at full throttle. Workers showed up, well-fed and purposeful, confident that their factory would still exist tomorrow. Materials arrived without interruption. Inspectors caught every defect before a finished tank rolled off the production line. German factories operated under conditions of perpetual terror. The Henschel works in Kassel had endured 39 separate bombing raids. The MAN facility in Nuremberg suffered 27 direct hits. Workers spent nights huddled in shelters, then spent days clearing rubble from blast craters. Component shipments arrived sporadically as Allied bombing systematically destroyed rail networks. Quality deteriorated when exhausted workers and slave laborers, operating under impossible conditions, made critical mistakes. An American production manager at Henschel left a record of cascading catastrophe. October 1944. Last night's bombing destroyed the entire heat treatment facility. Tiger armor plates need to go to Essen if rail lines hold. Essen was hit Tuesday. Our alternative is Dortmund. Dortmund was bombed Thursday. We currently have 200 Tiger hulls waiting for armor plating. This month, if we're fortunate, perhaps 20 will be finished. American production encountered no such torments. The Fisher Tank Arsenal in Grand Blanc, Michigan, employed 4,500 workers in complete safety. They worked standard shifts, returned to comfortable homes, and ate fresh meals in 18 separate cafeterias. Their children walked to schools. Their families shopped in well-stocked stores. Mass production generated learning curve advantages Germany couldn't possibly replicate. With every 1,000 Shermans completed, production costs dropped 8%. Efficiency improvements rolled out across all factories simultaneously. By 1944, Detroit Arsenal was producing Shermans 60% faster than in 1942, while actually employing fewer workers. Lieutenant Colonel Robert Young, analyzing the mechanics of continuous improvement, reported that worker ideas drove production forward steadily. A woman inspecting welded seams noticed that changing the sequence of 3 welds could save 4 minutes per tank. When implemented across every factory, this single adjustment freed up 3,300 production hours monthly, enough to build 40 additional Shermans. German production followed a catastrophic inverse trajectory. As experienced workers got drafted into the army, quality plummeted. As materials grew scarcer, inferior substitutes complicated every assembly step. As Allied bombing intensified, production scattered across smaller facilities, destroying efficiency gains. Tiger production time climbed from 300,000 man-hours in 1942 to 450,000 man-hours by late 1944. Each successive Tiger required more time and resources than the last, the complete opposite of American experience. The Tiger's technological sophistication carried hidden structural liabilities. The Maybach engine alone contained 120 components unique to Tigers. The transmission demanded specialized tooling. The gun's accuracy required meticulous maintenance. Every advantage pyramided the complexity. The Sherman's deliberate simplicity functioned as its greatest strength. The Ford V8 engine used components pulled from truck production. The transmission represented a modified truck design. The gun itself adapted technology from anti-aircraft platforms. Everything possessed proven reliability and could be repaired with ordinary tools from a soldier's basic kit. Master Sergeant Tom Williams, keeping Shermans operational for the 4th Armored Division, explained the practical reality. We fixed Shermans using parts from trucks, jeeps, whatever we had lying around. Needed a fuel pump? A truck's fuel pump worked fine. Needed electrical components? A jeep's alternator fit perfectly. Tigers demanded exact parts manufactured in specific German factories. We believed in whatever worked. American production dominance generated psychological weapons beyond mere numerical superiority. Captured German tank crews were deliberately taken on tours of American tank parks, displaying hundreds of freshly manufactured Shermans. They walked through repair facilities, rebuilding damaged tanks in mere hours. They witnessed the casual destruction of resources that revealed unlimited supplies. Hauptmann Friedrich Schulz, captured after his Tiger burned near Arlon, described his tour of a replacement depot. They showed us 500 new Shermans just waiting for crews. The American officer mentioned they received 500 monthly just for this single sector. In that moment, I knew every Tiger we'd destroyed meant absolutely nothing. We were bailing the ocean with teaspoons. These prisoners returned to Germany through prisoner exchanges or escapes, spreading devastating truths about American production capacity. Their testimonies carried more credibility than government propaganda, systematically destroying morale among Tiger crews training on the few remaining operational tanks. By winter 1944 through 45, the maintenance reality had become absolute and inescapable. American units maintained operational readiness rates around 90%, despite constant combat and brutal weather conditions. German Tiger units struggled to maintain 20% operational readiness, even without any combat whatsoever. The 56th Heavy Tank Battalion's official war diary for January 1945 tells the story with simple statistics. Total strength, 45 King Tigers. Operational 8. Awaiting repair, 37. Of these, 12 need specific engine components with none available. 15 need transmissions with 2 available. 10 need miscellaneous components with none available. Cannibalization has been authorized to maintain minimum operational strength. Meanwhile, the 37th Tank Battalion, 4th Armored Division, reported an entirely different reality. Total strength 53 Shermans. Operational 51. Awaiting repair 2. These will be completed by evening. Replacement tanks available in Depot 15. Replacement crews available. 3 complete crews plus individual specialists. April 1945 provided the ultimate demonstration of production mathematics at work. As American forces crossed the Rhine and pushed deeper into Germany, they left behind hundreds of damaged Shermans, simply not worth repairing given the endless supply of replacements arriving constantly. German forces, desperately short of usable tanks, attempted to recover and restore abandoned Shermans for their own use. The irony completed itself perfectly. The Wehrmacht, which had begun the war absolutely convinced of its technical superiority, found itself scavenging enemy tanks it had once publicly derided as inferior. Tigers, far too complicated to maintain without German infrastructure, were abandoned for lack of fuel or minor repairs nobody could fix. Shermans, simple and ruggedized, were pressed into desperate German service. Oberfuhrer Karl Müller, commanding an improvised battle group defending Nuremberg, reported the final humiliation of that moment. "My command consists of 3 Tigers, with 1 operational, 8 Shermans we captured and repaired, 12 assault guns, various other vehicles. The American tanks are considerably easier to maintain than our own. We are literally fighting American tanks with American tanks." The war concluded not with dramatic tank engagements, but with American columns driving steadily past abandoned German armor. Tigers sat beside roadsides with empty fuel tanks, depleted ammunition stores, and no spare parts to be found anywhere. Their crews, arguably the most skilled tank soldiers in history, walked home defeated. Sherman columns rolled through Germany in endless streams, each lost tank instantly replaced from the continuous flood of replacements flowing from Atlantic ports. Their crews, adequately trained and absolutely confident in their supply networks, barely paused to acknowledge the abandoned German giants rusting away. General Dwight Eisenhower, touring the defeated landscape, offered his assessment. "We did not defeat German tanks, we defeated German production." Every Tiger represented a tactical victory that ultimately cost them strategic capability. Every Sherman we lost was replaced before they finished tallying their kill count. The final accounting revealed the true mathematics of victory. Production speed for a Tiger required 300,000 to 450,000 man-hours. A Sherman needed 17,000 to 48,000 man-hours. The ratio became stark and undeniable. 1 Tiger's production time equaled between 6 and 26 Shermans. Cost analysis painted the same picture. A Tiger cost 250,000 to 300,000 Reichsmarks in 1945 values. A Sherman cost $44,556 to $64,455 at August 1945 official U.S. Army catalog prices. Direct financial comparison proved difficult given wartime currency manipulations. Fuel consumption told another story. A Tiger consumed 2.75 gallons per mile on roads. A Sherman consumed 0.5 gallons per mile. 1 Tiger's fuel consumption equaled 5.5 Shermans. Maintenance requirements diverged even more dramatically. Tigers required 10 hours of maintenance for every single hour of operation. Shermans required 1 hour of maintenance for every 10 hours of operation. 1 Tiger's maintenance needs equaled 100 Shermans. Training timelines showed the same pattern. Training a Tiger crew required 19 man-months minimum. Training a Sherman crew required 5 man-month standard. 1 Tiger crew's training time equaled roughly 4 Sherman crews. Post-war analysis by both American and German officers reached identical conclusions. The Tiger was possibly the finest tank of World War II when measured by individual capability. The Sherman was adequate at best in direct tank versus tank combat. Wars, however, aren't won by individual excellence. Wars are won by systemic superiority. Colonel Robert Cameron, writing the official U.S. Army history, concluded that the Sherman succeeded not despite its fundamental mediocrity, but because of it. Its simplicity allowed mass production. Its reliability allowed continuous operations. Its standardization allowed instant replacement. The Tiger failed not despite its excellence, but because of it. Its complexity prevented mass production. Its temperamental nature reduced operational readiness rates. Its uniqueness prevented replacement. General Major Friedrich von Mellenthin, analyzing German defeat in his own terse language, wrote more succinctly, "We built 1,347 Tigers. They built 49,234 Shermans. Everything else is just commentary." Behind those production numbers lay human costs that revealed the true price of German quality over quantity philosophy. Tiger crews, knowing their tanks were irreplaceable, fought to death rather than abandon them. Of approximately 8,000 German Tiger crewmen, fewer than 2,000 survived the entire war, a 75% casualty rate. Sherman crews, knowing replacement tanks arrived constantly, readily abandoned damaged vehicles. Of approximately 250,000 American tank crewmen trained, 6,500 died in combat, a 2.6% casualty rate. The production philosophy that seemed to value machines over men actually saved lives through abundance. Sergeant John Irwin, who crawled out of 3 different Shermans as they burned beneath him, explained the fundamental American advantage. "We were trained that tanks are replaceable. Crews aren't. When something burns, you bail out fast, walk back to the depot, get another tank." Germans fought like their Tigers were made of solid gold, because in their minds they were. They died trying to save machines. We lived by abandoning them. The production battle between Tigers and Shermans established principles that would shape military thinking for decades after the war ended. The United States had demonstrated conclusively that industrial capacity represented the ultimate weapon. The ability to produce, supply, and replace equipment faster than enemies could destroy it negated even significant tactical disadvantages. The Soviet Union, carefully observing American success, adopted similar mass production strategies during the Cold War. The T-54-85 tank became the most produced tank in all of human history, with over 100,000 built, double Sherman production. Simplicity, reliability, and overwhelming numbers became the hallmarks of Soviet armor doctrine for generations. Germany, learning hard lessons from defeat, abandoned complex perfection in favor of practical sufficiency. Post-war Leopard tanks emphasized reliability and ease of maintenance over maximum capability. German industry, rebuilt on American production principles learned during occupation, evolved into Europe's manufacturing powerhouse. At the 1985 Fort Knox reunion, veterans from both sides rendered their final verdict on the Tiger versus Sherman question. Otto Carius, the legendary German tank ace, provided perhaps the most honest assessment. The Tiger was a masterpiece of engineering. In single combat, a tournament of one tank against one tank, it would defeat any other tank of the war. Wars, however, aren't tournaments. The Sherman was a tool of industrial production, and industrial production won the war. We killed Shermans like cutting grass, but the grass grew faster than we could cut it. This isn't a failure of the Tiger or a success of the Sherman. It's the absolute reality of industrial warfare. Sergeant Wardell Henderson, who commanded 5 different Shermans through France and Germany, added the American perspective to the discussion. "I never wanted to face a Tiger in one-on-one combat. 1 against 1, we'd lose every single time. We never fought one-on-one. We fought 5 against 1, 10 against 1, with artillery support, air cover and replacement tanks waiting in depot. The Tiger was the superior tank. The Sherman was the winner's tank. I'd rather be a winner driving a Sherman than a dead hero in a Tiger." Today, restored Tigers command millions at auction houses worldwide. Only 7 running Tigers exist anywhere on the planet. Restored Shermans number in the hundreds. Hundreds continue operating on every continent. Even in preservation, the production differential persists visibly. At the Patton Museum in Fort Knox, a Tiger I sits beside an M4A3 Sherman. The placard reads simply, "Tiger I, one of 1,347 produced." This tank destroyed an estimated 40 Allied vehicles. Sherman M4A3, one of 49,234 produced. Tanks of this type liberated Europe. The mathematics of victory couldn't be expressed more clearly. In 1989, Friedrich Schultz, former Tiger commander, returned to Normandy for the 45th anniversary of D-Day. Standing in the American cemetery overlooking Omaha Beach, he addressed assembled veterans. "We arrived with the world's finest tanks, completely convinced of our superiority. You arrived with adequate tanks and overwhelming numbers. We fought with excellence. You fought with arithmetic. In war, arithmetic always wins. We built 1,347 Tigers. You built 49,234 Shermans. Those numbers aren't statistics. They're the difference between dictatorship and democracy, between scarcity and abundance, between defeat and victory. The crowd, composed of American, British, Canadian, and German veterans, stood in complete silence. The mathematics of warfare had been distilled to its essential truth. Germany built the world's finest tank during World War II, but America built the most. In the arithmetic of industrial warfare, most defeats best every single time. The German Tiger remained a masterpiece of engineering, a testament to technical excellence, a symbol of quality pursued above quantity. It was simultaneously a strategic disaster, a resource sink that drained German capabilities, and ultimately a monument to the dangerous fallacy that tactical superiority can overcome industrial inferiority. The American Sherman represented compromise, a good enough solution, a triumph of pragmatic procurement over perfectionism. It was simultaneously a war winner, a strategic masterpiece, and ultimately a monument to industrial democracy's power. Germany manufactured 1,347 Tiger tanks, each one a mechanical marvel, capable of dominating any battlefield where it appeared. America rolled out 49,234 Shermans and buried the Third Reich beneath an avalanche of adequate tanks with well-supplied crews. The numbers contain the entire story. Everything else, as Mellenthin observed, represents merely commentary. In the ultimate analysis, the Tiger versus Sherman debate was never about tanks themselves. It centered on production philosophy, industrial capacity, and the mathematics governing modern warfare. Germany lost the war in the factories of Detroit long before losing it on European battlefields. They were defeated not by superior tanks, but by more tanks. Not by higher quality, but overwhelming quantity. Not by tactical excellence, but strategic arithmetic. The Tiger endures as a symbol of German engineering mastery. The Sherman endures as a symbol of American production power. But the ratio of 49,234 to 1,347 remains the only number that ultimately mattered. That mathematical reality stands as permanent proof that in industrial warfare, the assembly line defeats the craftsman's bench every single time.